Ang programa ng Special Opinion Balita at iba pa ay tumatalakay sa mga isyu pang kasalukuyan at napapanahon. Mapapolitika, mapaopinyon, mapakomentaryo at balita, ang programa ito ay patas sa lahat. Walang kinikilingan, walang kinakampihan, at walang pinapanigan ang programa ito. Ang programa ito ay public service sa kahanginan at trabaho lamang.
araw ng Biyernes ngayon, no? Okay, 29 minutos. Pasado lang sa isang time check natin ngayon. Okay, 10 po ng... 11 pala. 11 ba ngayon? 11? Tama ba ang date ko? Dito Friday, 11. Okay, ng Oktubre 2024. Umaga po ng Friday. Mga minamahal natin po, suki-suki dito sa trabaho natin sa microphone. Okay, magandang umaga. Good morning sa lahat. Okay, sa mga minority. Okay, assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, no? Ayan. So, ang tanong ko ngayon, ano bang balitang hangin ba tayo? Okay, dito sa consolidated news natin. Ayan. O yung mga balita natin ngayon na tikom po rin na naipon dito po sa newsroom. Ayan po mga suki, no? Okay, papasok po sa platform po ng ADLSN TV News Online. Okay, sa programa Halo-Halo Special, Opinion, Balita at iba pa. Kasama po serbisyo publiko, tinig ng mamamayan. And then, ugnayan po sa mamamayan. Ayan. And then, pagkonserne, and then pag-aruga po sa mamamayan, no? Okay, isang oras sa programa natin. Okay, happy weekend naman sa inyo kasi Friday naman. Ayan po mga suki, no? Ayan. So, unahin po natin itong mga taga-Lebanon. Okay, yung biktima po ng giyera. Okay, pumunta po sa Australia mga suki, mga kababayan, no? So, ito po ang unang balita natin. Okay, mga kawawang Lebanese. Okay, tumakas po sa kanilang bansa dahil po sa kaguluhan po sa Middle East mga suki, no? Okay, pakinggan natin po magandang dilang anchor person, anchor woman ng Australia mga suki, no? So, pakinggan natin kanyang report itong magandang dilag mga suki, no? Oh, napakaganda. Okay. So, yan ang kung saan-saan po manggaling mga balita, no? Okay, nakakonect po rito sa ating ADLSN TV News Online, no? Pakinggan natin magandang dilag dito. Okay, hindi po si Palki Salma. Hindi ko alam kung sino pangalan nito, no?
More than 700 passengers have arrived in Australia overnight on federal government-assisted evacuation flights from Lebanon via Cyprus. A charter flight landed in Brisbane early this morning, while 2 flights touched down in Sydney last night. Passengers say there was a bomb blast near Beirut Airport as they were flying out.
Could be anything happen. When I was more concerned about when the plane take off, they might hear us.
Very grateful to have it home. It's always important to remember that there's still a lot of people suffering, but yeah, we're very grateful to have it home.
Another flight is expected to land in Sydney tonight. So far, more than 1,600 Australians, permanent residents and their families have been flown home, with nearly 4,000 more in Lebanon registered for repatriation flights. More than 700 passengers have arrived in Australia overnight on federal government-assisted evacuation flights from Lebanon via Cyprus. A charter flight landed in Brisbane early this morning, while 2 flights touched down in Sydney last night. Passengers say there was a bomb blast near Beirut Airport as they were flying out.
Could be anything happen. When I was more concerned about when the plane take off, they might hear us.
Very grateful to have it home. It's always important to remember that there's still a lot of people suffering, but yeah, we're very grateful to have it home.
Another flight is expected to land in Sydney tonight. So far, more than 1,600 Australians, permanent residents and their families have been flown home, with nearly 4,000 more in Lebanon registered for repatriation flights. More than 700 passengers have arrived in Australia overnight on federal government
More than 700.
flights from Lebanon via Cyprus. A charter flight landed in Brisbane early this morning, while 2 flights touched down in Sydney last night. Passengers say there was a bomb blast near Beirut Airport as they were flying out.
Could be anything happen. And I was more concerned about when the plane take off, they might hit us.
Very grateful to have it home. It's always important to remember that there's still a lot of people suffering, but yeah, we're very grateful to have it home.
Another flight is expected.
Okay. Tatlong beses na yun mga suki, no? Yung ganung mahigit 700 po mga Lebanese national ay dumating po sa bansang Australia para mag-evacuate na sila, no? Para sa kaligtasan ng kanilang buhay. Ayan po ang situation. Okay, yan po sa Beirut, Lebanon mga suki, no? Okay, kawawa talaga. Okay, so yan po ang unang balita natin. Anong unahin natin? Okay, itong balitang hangin. Balitang hangin, no? Ayan. Unahin na natin kahit na anong susunod balita, basta meron pong balitang hangin muna. Ayan. Okay. Okay, unahin natin balitang hangin. Kahit anong susunod na balita, at least nakabalitang hangin tayo, no? Ayan. Okay, antayin natin paikot. Okay, halos hindi na umikot. Okay, ang system mga kababayan, no? Sige, umaandar na. Umaandar na po mga kababayan, no? Grabe. Okay, antayin natin dumating po doon sa yan na.
Happy Friday po sa ating lahat. Ako si Benison Estare.
Okay, Benison.
Patuloy pa rin yung epekto ng northeasterly wind flow o yung may kalamigang hangin po galing dito sa Hilagang Silangan at nagdadala pa rin ng minsan malalakas na ulan dito sa northern Luzon. Habang sa natitirang bahagi ng ating bansa, andyan pa rin ang mga localized thunderstorms, lalo na sa dakong hapon hanggang sa gabi. Base naman sa ating latest satellite animation, wala tayong inaasahang bagyo na papasok ng ating Philippine Area of Responsibility sa mga susunod na araw, pero patuloy monitoring natin for possible formations of shallow circulation or may hinang low pressure area dito po sa may silangan ng bansa at hindi naman ito inaasahan na magiging bagyo sa ngayon. Ngayong araw, asahan pa rin
Kain tayo ng pancit canton.
Cordillera Administrative Region at
Okay, pancit canton, no?
dahil pa rin yan sa northeasterly wind flow. Mahina ang katamtamang mga pagulan at minsan lumalakas po pagsapit ang hapon hanggang sa gabi, kaya't mag-ingat sa mga posibleng pagbaha at pagbuho ng lupa at lagi magkantabay sa ating mga updates. Sa natitirang bahagi ng Luzon, andyan pa rin ang bahagyang maulap hanggang maulap na kalangitan, umaga hanggang tanghali, pero may mga areas na dito sa natitirang bahagi ng Central Luzon plus Ilocos Region ang magkakaroon na ng mga isolated na pag-ulan. Pagsapit ang hapon hanggang gabi, malaking bahagi na po ng Luzon na magkakaroon ng mga isolated rain showers or thunderstorms na usually po ay nagtatagal ng 2 hanggang 3 oras. Temperature natin sa Metro Manila mula 25 hanggang 32 degrees pa rin, habang sa Baguio nananatiling malamig from 17 to 22 degrees Celsius. Sa ating mga kababayan po dito sa Palawan, ganyan sa Western Visayas and Negros Island region, asahan pa rin ng fair weather conditions umaga hanggang tanghali, habang sa may central and eastern portions of Visayas, partly cloudy to cloudy skies. Then pagsapit po ng hapon hanggang sa gabi, malaking bahagi na po ng Visayas at Palawan na magkakaroon ng kaulapan at mataas muli ang chance ng mga bulupulong ulan at mga thunderstorms pagsapit po ng hapon hanggang gabi. So make sure po na meron pa rin tayong dalampayan. Temperature natin sa Metro Cebu, 26 to 32 degrees Celsius. At panghuli sa ating mga kababayan po sa Mindanao, aasahan pa rin ang maaraw na panahon most of Mindanao sa umaga hanggang sa tanghali. Nasasabayan ng mainit at maalinsangan na tanghali, pero pagsapit muli ng hapon hanggang sa gabi, maraming lugar na magkakaroon ng mga kaulapan, lalo na yung malapit po sa mga bundukan, at aasahan pa rin ang mga isolated na ulan at mga thunderstorms na usually nga po ay nagtatagal ng 2 hanggang 3 oras. So magdala pa rin po ng payong kung lalabas sa bahay, lalo na pagsapit ng hapon. Temperature natin sa Zamboanga City, pinakamainit hanggang 34 degrees Celsius, habang sa Davao City hanggang 33 degrees Celsius. Sa ngayon hanggang sa mga susunod na araw, wala pa rin tayong asahang gale warning or pagtaas ng mga pag-alon. Generally, Banaya nagkatamtaman dito sa may Southern Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, habang katamtaman ng taas ng alon hanggang 2.5 meters sa may Northern and Central Luzon. At kapag may mga thunderstorms, posibleng umabot sa 2.5 meters sa natitirang baybayin pa ng ating bansa. Simula naman po bukas hanggang sa Lunes, meron tayong 2 weather systems na iiral, ang northeasterly wind flow dito sa may Northern Luzon pa rin, at easterlies dito sa silangang parte ng ating bansa, lalo na po pagsapit ng late Sunday hanggang sa kalagitnaan na po ng susunod na linggo. Mataas ang chance ng ulan dito sa may Northern Luzon, kabilang ng Cagayan Valley, Cordillera Region, and Aurora over the weekend, habang pagsapit naman po ng Sunday hanggang sa Monday, mataas ang chance ng ulan sa Cagayan Valley, pababa ng Aurora, Quezon hanggang sa ilang parte po ng Bicol Region dahil naman sa easterlies. Yung mga hindi natin nabanggit na lugar, kabilang ng Metro Manila, makakaranas pa rin ng bahagyo maulap at madalas maulap na kalangitan pagsapit po ng hapon, at meron pa rin tsansa ng mga pulupulong pag-ulan or pagkidlat, pagkulog. Sunrise po natin ay 5:47 pa rin ng umaga, sunset 5:39 ng hapon. Yan muna ang likas mula dito sa Weather Forecasting ng Pag-asa. Ako muli si Benison Estareja. Mag-ingat po tayo.
Ang programa ng Special Opinion Balita at iba pa ay tumatalakay sa mga isu pang kasalukuyan at napapanahon. Mapapolitika, mapaopinyon, mapakomentaryo at balita, ang programa ito ay patas sa lahat. Walang kinikilingan, walang kinakampihan, at walang pinapanigan ang programa ito. Ang programa ito ay public service sa kahanginan at trabaho lamang.
Okay. Yan po mga suki, no? Okay. Sige po, sanay lang, no?
Lolly voice, monster voice, female voice, male voice. Lolly voice.
Okay, huwag na lang natin na banggitin po ang source natin sa news. Meron naman news sa dalawang biktima po ng paslang po ng media dyan po sa pag-coverage. Okay, dyan po sa parte ng Gaza mga suki, no? Okay, meron naman namatay bagong mga kasamahan natin po tagapagbalita, no? So itong source ng news ito, just happened, Israel weapons factory destroyed by Iranian, ano ito? Pakinggan na lang natin, no? Okay. 6 na oras po nakapasa. Ayan.
Bago Jumularis Morrissey.
Pauwi na mi. Ako na lang naman mag-isa dito.
Tanggalin natin ito, no? Ayan. Mga independent news ito, no? Okay. Bakit walang sound? Ayaw talaga ilagyan ng sound, no? Grabe. Paano hindi karami ng missile yan? Tumama talaga. Ayan. Okay, kahit kunti lang basta parinig lang natin ito, no? Wala kang marinig na narrative basta kuwan na lang. Ang marinig mo ay dagundong. Ayan. Okay, salamat po. Thank you for giving us press information, no, from the ground. Ayan po mga suki, no? Importante kasi malaman natin ng situation sa ground, no? Ang tunog yon galing po sa launching pad. Galing po sa teritoryo ng Iran. Papunta po doon sa tinatarget nila factory po ng paggawa ng baril, no? Ayan. Weapons factory. Ayan. Yan po ang dagundong po ng yan. Ang akin naman ay importante may alam natin may nangyari sa ground, no? Ayan. Yan ang palipad naman. Dami pa mga kababayan, no? Woo! Sayang ba hindi nyo makita? Yung siren niya, galing yan sa territory po ng Israel. Huh.
Don't skip this video. God wants to speak to you. He has chosen you. If you are watching this video, it means you have been chosen to receive unexpected money. A large amount, so large that you can share it with everyone you love. The only thing you need to do for this to become reality is to listen to the miraculous 60-second audio. And then, money will start coming into your life from all possible places. If today you need to pay a bill, settle a debt, or if you simply would like more money in your life, the 60-second audio will help you. This audio is so powerful and strong that you should listen to it only once a day, otherwise you might end up attracting too much money. Just so you understand the power of this audio, it has been hidden from you for years, because this is the secret of the rich to get so much money. And they definitely do not want you to discover it. In fact, there are few people in the world who have the chance to access the audio. But if you are watching this video, you have been chosen for this.
I will not
So feel
accept.
special. Today
Okay.
you have the chance to change
Sorry,
your
I will
life,
not accept.
to access the 60-second audio and understand everything about how it works. Just click on the Learn More button. You will be redirected to a video where I explain everything to you. You will understand what this audio is and why it is so powerful. And if you stay until the end of the video, you could receive money today. Click now.
No, I will not receive. I will not receive. Okay.
Ang programang Special Opinion Balita at iba pa ay tumatalakay sa mga isu pang kasalukuyan at napapanahon. Mapapolitika, mapaopinyon, mapakomentaryo at balita, ang programa ito ay patas sa lahat. Walang kinikilingan, walang kinakampihan, at walang pinapanigan ang programa ito. Ang programa ito ay public service sa kahanginan at trabaho lamang.
Grabe, no? Kahit kunti lang at least meron tayong makuha na press information po galing sa ground, no? Umusok ang ground. Ayan. So tama na po mga kababayan. At least kahit partial lang ay makakuha tayo ng press information, no? Okay. Kasi itong napaka-stricto po ang government po ng Israel, no? Ayaw nila malaman, okay, may nangyayari po sa kanila, no? Okay, mahigpit po. Pero yung mga independent, okay, yung mga magtiwala sa atin, okay, magpadala rin. Okay. Basta mailabas lang po ang katotohanan, no? Ito, war with Iran. Okay, Netanyahu dragging US into war with Iran, with Professor Muhammad Marandi. Magaling ito professor ito mga kababayan, no? Okay, pakinggan natin naman.
I just made a $27 ebook in 2 minutes using AI. Watch how I did it, so you can do it too. Here I am in Designer, and the first thing you'll notice is this clean, user-friendly interface.
Okay.
Now watch closely. I'm clicking Create New Project.
Diretso na lang natin ito.
We need a new system. We need a new society. We need to demand that which may have sounded impossible even a few weeks ago, but is not only realizable, but an imperative necessity. Kamala Harris stated that Iran is the U.S. #1 enemy as Israel pounded Lebanon and Palestine. Donald Trump announced that he was ready to obliterate Iranian cities. Regional war in the Middle East is rapidly expanding. Welcome to the Socialist Program. I'm your host, Brian Becker. Today we're talking once again with Professor Mohammad Marandi to give his insight on the Middle East and what's happening inside of Iran. Mohammad is an expert on American studies and a teacher, a professor at the University of Tehran. Mohammad, welcome back.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
The news right now, Mohammad, is that Yoav Gallant, the defense minister of Israel, who has met with Lloyd Austin 80 times, we've just learned this, 80 times in the last year, that's, multiple times per week, canceled the visit to meet with President Biden this week because Netanyahu insisted that he cancel the visit until Biden talks to Netanyahu himself, and presumably this is to agree upon a war plan directed against Iran. Anyway, I want to get your thoughts, if you have them, about what it means for Gallant's trip to be canceled. Does that have any relevance? What is Netanyahu and what are the Israelis planning? And what's the United States position on this? In the last 24 hours, Mohammed, the United States, which had earlier insisted that it wanted a 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon, has retracted that and said, no, we're happy, we're cool with what the Israelis are doing. Anyway, a tense moment, obviously. What do you think? What's your assessment?
Well, as expected, and as I said earlier, after Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was martyred, the Israelis have been beaten badly on the border with Lebanon. They tried to enter Lebanese territory on many occasions with heavy air support and artillery support, but they lost large numbers of troops, and the casualties among the Hezbollah soldiers in the south are much lower than Israel. And as I've said repeatedly, the tunnels that Hezbollah has are extensive. There are thousands of kilometers of tunnels in the south and the central part of Lebanon, and also in parts of the north. And that murdering a number of officials or military officials in Beirut, which is the weakest link of Hezbollah, because Beirut is heavily infiltrated. It has always been heavily infiltrated by spies. Western embassies and NGOs have always been gathering intelligence for the Israeli regime, the Five Eyes, and many journalists, obviously, they've been doing this for decades. So this is a more difficult place for Hezbollah to protect its assets and its information. But also under Beirut, because it's by the sea, the tunnel system is not like the rest under the ground in the rest of the country. Many of the tunnels go under mountains, and they're huge underground missile bases. They are very well protected. They're underground hospitals and other assets. So when they were gloating, the United States and the Europeans, after murdering Syed Hassan Nasrallah. Of course, they murdered him alongside hundreds of civilians who were in the six towers, residential towers that were totally obliterated. I was roughly 1,000 meters from the explosion from the attack when it happened. They used 83, I've been told, one-ton bunker busters. So they slaughtered all the women and children in those towers. And I know those towers. I've walked by them many times. I've driven by them because I lived in Beirut for my sabbatical for a year. So despite the slaughter of Western journalists and Western elites and Western diplomats, they were gloating. And the Israeli regime was gloating. But back then I was telling Western journalists that Hezbollah will not be deterred. They will in fact grow stronger. And we've seen that Syed Hassan Nasrallah, his martyrdom has caused uproar across the region. It has made Hezbollah even more popular, and people across the region that until now were indifferent are suddenly paying attention. In Iraq, we see a lot of anger growing there. So the Israelis have failed, and I think that the regime is, for a year they've been fighting, and they've faced one dead end after another, one failure after another on the Lebanese border before this escalation, in Gaza, where they failed to capture this dot on the map, in the Red Sea, where the Americans couldn't do anything for them, and therefore they need further escalation now. And of course, they want to attack the Iranians, not because they can win in any exchange with Iran, because Iran has already promised that if the Israeli regime escalates again, it will hammer it much harder next time, and very swiftly. But the regime wants to bring in the Americans. That's basically my understanding of the situation. They want to escalate to bring in the Americans, otherwise an exchange with Iran will only lead to failure. The Israeli regime is small. Iran has a huge arsenal of drones and missiles, hundreds of thousands of each in underground cities across the country that were made after the United States invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. They were made to defend the country against the United States. So Iran has more than enough to devastate the regime. So these meetings, I think, are on the one hand to get more U.S. support, but I also think that there is probably a lot of tension behind the scenes. The American government, the regime in Washington, does not want to lose the election, and if the war escalates, that could change things. If the Americans enter the war, I think that would probably lead to Kamala Harris losing the election, because if they strike the Iranians will devastate their bases in the Persian Gulf, and those Arab family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf will be swept away because they'll be seen as hostile. And in Iraq, the resistance will overrun the American bases and expel all Americans from the country. And that would lead to a global economic meltdown, worse than 1929, something that will affect all of us probably for decades to come. And therefore, I think the Americans are desperate not to let this happen, but Netanyahu is desperate to have this happen. So I think between now and election day, many things can happen.
It's a shame so many people struggle with the most common teeth and gum problems, when this simple 30-second bedtime warm water ritual helped me reclaim stronger, healthy teeth faster than I thought possible. As a dental hygienist, I'm always interested in the latest dental health techniques for my patients. Recently at a family dinner, my father, George, a dentist for over 30 years, shared with me an intriguing new discovery. He learned of an amazing bedtime warm water ritual from several patients who began doing this 30-second routine involving common kitchen ingredients in warm water. He was stunned when they came in virtually no plaque buildup, improved their gum recession, and stronger enamel integrity. I'll admit I was doubtful initially, but Dad grinned widely, and his gums were the pinkest I'd ever seen them. He chuckled that he started skipping his own dental visits thanks to this simple ritual he performs each night. Curious, I added a warm water tonic to my own bedtime routine.
Election day, many things could happen.
Yeah. You know, your narrative is almost 180 degrees different from what people are getting in the U.S. media. What people in the U.S. media are getting is that Hezbollah is now a headless organization, that there have been these military achievements by the state of Israel, that Hamas is degraded in Gaza, that the invasion of Lebanon is imposing huge losses for the Lebanese resistance. I mean, it's really 180 degrees different. And the way the U.S. media is talking about Gallant's visit being canceled for the time being is that Netanyahu just needs to make sure the Americans are on the same page before Gallant comes so that the strikes against Iran will happen. In other words, Israel is winning, the resistance is losing, Iran is on not its last legs, but it's the so-called axis of resistance, not so-called, but what the U.S. media, how the U.S. media portrays it, the axis of resistance is basically degraded. Iran standing in the Middle East is weak. I mean, your narrative, Mohammed, is not accepted at all by the U.S. mainstream media. And then at the same time, people in the United States have to remember that everything that they've ever heard about the Middle East has been pretty much premised on a fabrication. Why did the U.S. have to go to war against Iraq? Why did the U.S. have to go to war against Libya? The certainty with which the U.S. media announced that the Assad government in Syria was sure to fall just as the Gaddafi government had fallen in 2011. So anyway, I mean, it's really a remarkable difference of perspective. Is your perspective basically accepted also within the body politic in Lebanon or within Iran? I want to talk about that. And then I want to come back to you with it after we play a short clip. It's Kamala Harris basically sounding like she's ready to go to war with Iran. Anyway, I want to get your follow-up thoughts if I could.
Which foreign country do you consider to be our greatest adversary?
I think there's an obvious one in mind, which is Iran. Iran has American blood on their hands, okay? This attack on Israel, 200 ballistic missiles. What we need to do to ensure that Iran never achieves the ability to be a nuclear power, that is one of my highest priorities.
So if you have proof that Iran is building a nuclear weapon, would you take military action?
I'm not going to talk about hypotheticals at this moment.
Mohammed, there's a lot there. You know, the U.S. has thousands and thousands, really tens of thousands of nuclear weapons. It's the only country in the world that ever used nuclear weapons. They used them against civilian cities in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. But anyway, aside from the hubris and the arrogance and the warmongering, I want to get your take on things.
Well, Brian, I think if we go back to 1982, when the Israeli regime invaded Lebanon, regardless of the fact that there was no Hezbollah back then, so Israeli aggression goes back decades, aggression against Lebanon, that they took the capital, Beirut, they committed the Sabra and Shatila massacre, killing almost 4,000 Palestinians in 36 hours with their Christian right-wing militia allies in Lebanon, which still exist today and that are very close to Western embassies. So genocide is nothing new to the Israeli regime. But in 1982, it took them roughly 5 days to get to Beirut. Now, the offensive has been going on for quite a while now. And they have yet to take a village in southern Lebanon. And the casualty figures are high. and live footage comes out of Lebanon from local media of Israeli tanks burning, Israeli soldiers being taken away by injured and dead soldiers taken by helicopter. So it's very difficult to pretend that the Israelis have had, that the regime has had any success. While in the West, the media is basically shutting out information for the public, the people in the region are seeing what's happening. During the initial days after the murder of and martyrdom of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, there was a lot of concern among ordinary people, but they were still determined. I was in Beirut, as I said, when he was martyred. I was there during the first few days when the fighting, the severe fighting began. The only success of the Israeli regime had been bombing apartment towers and slaughtering ordinary people. That's their only success. And the West is, of course, helping them do that. The EU is helping them do that. The Americans, the Canadians, they're all helping them because they're providing the regime with political cover to get away with crimes against humanity. The photo that you're just now showing, these are apartment blocks. People lived in them, and now they're under the rubble. People are buried there. I think actually that's the place I visited. I'm not quite sure, but after one of the bombings, we visited a site where the smoke was still rising, and it was so upsetting because I was wondering to myself whether there are people underneath who are shouting for help. I couldn't hear anything, but I kept thinking about it. But the West doesn't care. The Western journalists, they don't care. The legacy media journalists, they call these Hezbollah strongholds in order to dehumanize people and to help the Israelis carry out these atrocities. Just like the lies that we saw on October the 7th, when they lied about rape, when they lied about beheadings, when they lied about cooking children or baking children or whatever. They did that in order to help the Israeli regime carry out genocide. So these journalists are foot soldiers for a genocidal army. And in Lebanon, they're doing the same. But propaganda can only go so far. The question that people have to ask themselves is that if the Israelis have succeeded, then where are they on the map right now in Lebanon? Where are they? Have they advanced to Sur or Sayda, or where have they captured? And then all they have to do is go to a map, and even Wikipedia, which is CIA-linked asset, but if they go to Wikipedia and look at the events of the 1982 war, they'll see the complete different situation. If the regime is so strong, and if Hamas is beaten back and destroyed, then why can't the Israeli regime take Gaza? Why have they pulled back, and in a couple of areas in Gaza, they've occupied 2 areas in Gaza, and they just slaughter people as they've been doing over the last year. So no, the Israelis have failed, they will continue to fail, and the Americans should be careful. Ordinary Americans should beware, because if the Israeli regime doesn't care about the United States, it doesn't care about the United States or the Europeans. I mean, when they weaponize electronic products, they basically they destroyed Western brands, because people across our region are going to beware about buying iPhones or anything produced by Taiwan or Korea or Samsung phones or laptops.
10 minuto na lang, no?
The Israelis have been allowed to infiltrate supply chains. When a regime is allowed to do that and to harm Western brands, that shows they don't care about the West. The Israeli regime wants the United States to get into a fight with Iran, a fight that the Americans can't win. No one can win. Everyone will lose. It would be a lose-lose situation for everyone, because, as I said earlier, there's a balance of terror between Iran and the United States. If there is a battle, there will be no more oil or gas coming from this region, from the Persian Gulf region or Iraq or anywhere else. the American economy will collapse and millions of people, tens of millions of people across the world will be on the move. So the Israelis are fine with that. If it preserves if it helps them preserve their apartheid regime, their ethno-supremacist regime, so be it. But I think ordinary Americans should be aware that the political establishment doesn't behave too foolishly.
Tara, let's buy now and let's pay later. Get 0% vouchers. Receive your orders first before paying. And have a key.
We should be aware that the political establishment doesn't behave too foolishly.
Let's go back again for our audience who may not have been paying attention to the Middle East.
Professor Muhammad Marandi, no?
General Soleimani, important top...
Professor Muhammad Marandi.
I think we have some B-roll where people can sort of see his image. He came to Baghdad airport, I think it was January 3rd, 2020, came for peace talks. Donald Trump was then president of the United States. He got out of the plane, got into a car, and then a U.S. drone like murdered him and murdered the other people in the car, just blew it up in an airport. They just blew it up. And at that time, the Iranians said, look, we're gonna retaliate for sure. And you know, in the United States, Mohammed, we started organizing demonstrations. We had tens of thousands of people actually on January 5th in Washington, D.C. and 70 other cities, because it really looked like the U.S. was going to have a big war with Iran at that time, or certainly there was the danger of it. And the Iranians, well, if it wasn't Iran, it was forces that were certainly opposed to U.S. occupation in the Middle East, started striking U.S. military bases in Iraq, and all of the U.S. air defenses were penetrated. Every base that was targeted was struck. It still seemed like a somewhat measured attack because there weren't a lot of U.S. casualties, but there were a lot of U.S. injuries, a lot of U.S. brain injuries, et cetera, and basically Iran said to the Trump administration, okay, the ball is in your court. We've just demonstrated that we can hit your...
Okay, isang oras lang ha, isang oras lang.
If we want to, we can kill a lot of American soldiers. The fact that there's not a lot of American soldiers who are dead is, if anything, a decision on our part to have a measured response, but one that sends a clear message that we can strike. And so everybody was waiting. There was like everybody's on the edge of their seat. What would Trump do? And Trump didn't do anything. There was no counter retaliation for Iran's retaliation. Wisely, the Trump administration stepped back. If they had not stepped back, Mohammed, we would have had full-scale regional and perhaps even greater than regional war. Everybody who pays attention to history knows World War I, which began in 1914, was preceded by the Balkans Wars of 1912 and 1913, and nobody thought in 1914 that World War I was going to be a world war, that 20 million people would die. All of that happened as a consequence of blunders, mistakes, unanticipated events, relationships that were not properly understood. In other words, a dynamic moment. Trump in 2020 and his team stepped back. We're in the same situation. Iran has now hit Israel with at least 180 missiles in retaliation for the killing of Nasrallah and Ismail Haniyeh, who was visiting Iran as a guest of Iran, visiting while Iran's new president was being inaugurated. So Iran hit back at Israel, and last time in 2020, the U.S. didn't hit back. But if Israel hits back, this is what you're saying, Mohammed, is that we are on the cusp of a bigger, wider war. And Israel is for it. I want you to explain why Israel would be for it, and why the U.S., even though it's sort of talking tough, has to be very wary about it.
Well, first, I have to remind your audience that there have been many provocations by the Americans and the Israelis. One was the murder of General Soleimani, where they murdered him as he was going to Baghdad at the invitation of the Iraqi Prime Minister, who wanted to discuss with him a letter from Saudi Arabia about rapprochement and easing tensions. So he went to Baghdad, he was leaving the airport, there were two cars, and he was with the commander of the Iraqis who was leading the fight against ISIS. So these two gentlemen, the Iraqi and the Iranian, they were leading the fight against ISIS, and the Americans murdered them. He was going to be 7, 8 hours later at 8 in the morning, I think. He was to meet the Prime Minister of Iraq to discuss improving relations with Saudi Arabia. So the Americans murdered him because he had defeated ISIS, and the Americans, of course, had supported ISIS, they helped create ISIS, and also the Americans did not want rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. But also, if we go back, we should remember that the first offensive act against Iran was carried out actually by the Americans and the Israelis when they carried out a cyber attack against Iran's nuclear program many years ago. And then the Israelis, with American help and the help of Western intelligence agencies, especially the MEK terror organization, the terror cult that has bases across Europe, and one big one in particular in Albania, they started to assassinate a number of Iranian scientists. One of them was a colleague of mine at the University of Tehran who was murdered in front of his wife. Then they murdered the Deputy Minister of Defense. So the Israelis have carried out many provocations. Then in April, when they bombed the Iranian embassy, the United States and Western governments supported them at the UN Security Council. So they supported the bombing of an embassy, and then they condemned Iran for retaliating. And at that time, the Iranians carried out a limited retaliation. It was entitled to gather intelligence, but also to force the Americans and the Israelis to show their hands. Instead of learning their lesson, the Americans and the Israelis, they saw this as a sign of weakness. And this time around, after again, another escalation by murdering Martyr Ismail Penny in Tehran,
Talastas pula. Okay, malapit na matapos, no? Sandali lang.
By murdering Martyr Ismail Penny in Tehran, who was there, as you pointed out, at the invitation of the president, and in an official government guest house, the Iranians felt that they had to hit back much harder, so that the Israelis would understand that Iran is dead serious. So now we're waiting to see what the Israeli regime does. But the Iranians have already promised that if the Israelis strike, Iran is going to strike much harder this time. In other words, the 200 missiles, or 200 or so missiles that we saw last week, it'll be much worse than that. And the Iranians have yet to use their hypersonic missiles or the most advanced missiles, because they don't want to show. They want to keep their secrets for whenever. For when the day comes when they need to use their best missiles to destroy Israeli infrastructure. So this is where we are right now. We are at a very dangerous point. The Israeli regime has been humiliated by the Iranians because, in April they were saying we stopped all the drones, but these were missiles and they almost all got through. And on the other hand, as I pointed out, on the border, they've been badly beaten by Hezbollah and their tunnel systems across southern Lebanon. So we're going to have to wait and see. But the Iranians are not going to, that the era of strategic patience is over for Iran. And the Americans have to recognize that Iran is not going to be intimidated. And Iranian key assets, by the way, are well protected. It's not as if the Americans can, or especially the Israelis, can destroy Iran's nuclear program. Iran's nuclear program is deep underground. It was built to protect it from American airstrikes, which are far more capable than the Americans are far more capable than the Israelis. And also, I think they have to keep in mind that if they do strike the nuclear program, then Iran will leave the NPT. And the advisor to the leader, Dr. Kharozi, said twice that Iran may change its nuclear posture.
Professor Muhammad Marandi.
They can scream and yell and threaten and behave in arrogance, but they know quite well that they're in no position to fight a war with Iran. It's not a war that they will be able to win.
There's a lot there, Mohammed. Again, for people who might not know what the NPT is, the 1969 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was basically a quid pro quo between nuclear powers, governments that already had nuclear weapons, and governments that did not yet have nuclear weapons. And the quid pro quo was something like this. We, the nuclear powers, won't continue to build. In fact, we'll start to diminish and gradually eliminate our nuclear weapons in exchange for you, the countries that are not yet nuclear powers, not acquiring nuclear weapons. And Iran is a signatory to that deal. Now, the U.S. is obviously in violation of the NPT. The U.S. is not only building more nuclear weapons, under Obama, they started a fourth generation of nuclear weapons. So on one level, the countries that pledged not to get nuclear weapons would have sort of a reason, a legal reason to say, well, look, the quid pro quo doesn't really exist, we're going to build nuclear weapons. Iran has not done that yet. Iran has in fact said, we don't want nuclear weapons are evil, they should be gotten rid of, they're fundamentally a war crime, they can't distinguish between combatants and civilians, but we, Iran, don't have them. But as you're saying, and I think this is so important, the NPT, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, does build into the treaty the right of a member signatory to withdraw from the NPT and say, in the name of our own national self-defense, we must acquire nuclear weapons. That's what North Korea decided to do after George W. Bush labeled North Korea, Iran, and Iraq an axis of evil on the eve of the U.S. invasion of Iraq. And so North Korea said, okay, well, we're not going to be Iraq, we're getting nuclear weapons, and now they're a nuclear power. Iran hasn't done that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I also want to point something out as well that I think is very important. I don't follow American news channels, and I do read American media to a degree. But one thing I think Americans should recognize, because their Iran pundits are almost universally, almost all of them are fools. They are people who work in think tanks, they're paid to say what they say, they'll say what the elites want them to hear, they'll say what the people who fund them want them to say. And so they come on TV and talk nonsense day and night on CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, it doesn't matter. I could name them, but they're not even, worth discussing. So the Americans are basically talking to themselves about Iran. And they say how the regime, as they like to call it, is unpopular and people want to overthrow it, and that it's about to implode. If anyone has been monitoring the Friday prayers last week, they will have learned a great deal about Iran. It took place, of course, early in the morning.
Gusto po ba nyo? Wala na kong oras. Pero kung gusto nyo, ituloy na lang natin. Ito po ay si Professor Muhammad Marandi ng University of Tehran, no?
Ayatollah Khamenei declared his office declared a few days before Friday prayers that he's going to lead the prayers. And he hasn't done that for a number of years. And this was at a time when there was a lot of online chatter that the Israeli regime wants to strike Tehran. And the Western media was saying, they say that these Iranian sources, unnamed Iranian officials, said that they moved the leader out of his office or residence for protection, and that sort of nonsense. Whenever the Western media, by the way, says unnamed Iranian officials, that means they're lying. It's just fabrication. Whenever you see it, or unnamed Hezbollah officials, that means they're lying. They're just making it up. But yeah, these are scenes. I was at the Friday prayers. I was kilometers away from where you see right now these pictures. There were millions of people there. It was unprecedented. People, since they thought that the prayers were going to be attacked, they went to the prayers. And the leader, he went to the prayers. Not only did he go to the prayers, he went an hour earlier and held the ceremony for the martyrdom of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. Then he led the prayers, and then he stayed there to greet people. It was a show of force. So you had millions of people, millions of Iranians going to these prayers under circumstances which were unclear. People were prepared for airstrikes. They were prepared for drone strikes. And there were anti-aircraft missile systems that you could see on the hilltops around the place of prayer. The Islamic Republic of Iran has a high degree of legitimacy. And the Islamic Republic of Iran is fully prepared to defend itself. And the Americans have much more to lose than Iran does in any conflict. Because if the global economy collapses, we've been under sanctions for decades. Our lives will be more difficult, without a doubt. But the United States, it will fall much harder. And therefore, if the biggest loser would be the United States. So when these American officials listen to these foolish Iranians or these pundits that they're not really Iranian. They went to the United States. Some of them don't even speak proper Persian. Some of them haven't been in Iran for decades. And all of them are basically mercenaries. Almost every single one of them are mercenaries who say what needs to be said because that's what the think tank.
Okay, break muna natin. Ang gandang ang gandang narrative po ni Professor yung at saka yung kausap niya, parehas ata sila yung professor. Okay, counterpart sa US, no? Itong si Professor Muhammad Marandi po ng Tehran University, no? Okay, produkto ng US and then nagtuturo po sa kasi Iranian din siya, na originated Iranian, pero US citizen nata ito si Professor Muhammad Marandi, no? Ayan. Okay, kinuha ng Iranian government para magturo po doon sa mga Irani. Ano bang tawag sa Irani? Irani, no? Mga Iranian. Okay, doon po sa bansa nila, no? So, malaking bayad yun. Isang professor, okay ba, produkto ng US, and then, pinapauwi sa kanila, para magturo po ng education sa kanyang knowledge, diyan po sa Tehran University, no?
Ang programang Special Opinion Balita at iba pa ay tumatalakay sa mga isyu pang kasalukuyan at napapanahon. Mapapolitika, mapaopinyon, mapakomentaryo at balita, ang programa ito ay patas sa lahat. Walang kinikilingan, walang kinakampihan, at walang pinapanigan ang programa ito. Ang programa ito ay public service sa kahanginan at trabaho lamang.
Okay, tawanan lang natin ang problema ng daigdig. Kung sineseryoso mo, ay wala ka. Okay, mawalan ka ng buhok. Ayan po nga, Suki, no? So, ang mga dalaga at saka binata kailangan makasawa na po, mga Suki, no? Ayan. Mahirap na naabutan ka ng World War III, mga Suki, no? Ayan. Sige, Professor Muhammad Marandi, no? Ayan.
So just say what needs to be said because that's what the think tanks that pay them want them to say. And those think tanks are linked to the corridors of power. So the Americans are deceiving themselves if they think that Iran is about to implode, that if Iran is weak, if people don't support the Islamic Republic. I don't think Trump, Trump who always brags about his crowds, he can never muster anything, a fraction of the crowd that we saw in Friday prayers. And people who are prepared for strikes on them, and political leaders who were in the front were prepared to be.
Okay, hindi siya tono ng Iranian, no? Tono siya ng Western education, pero itong si Professor Muhammad Marandi, no? Okay, ang kanyang diction, ang kanyang mga ginagamit na language ay talagang pure American English, mga kababayan, no? Yan po si Professor Muhammad Marandi. Lagi natin sabaybayan itong tao, itong mga kababayan, no? Sa kanyang mga deep insight, pag-analyze po sa daigdig, mga kababayan, no? In particular itong Iran at saka itong mga Western nation, mga Suki, no? Ayan. Magaling. Ayan.
Hit by drones and missiles. So I think it was a show of force, and I think a lesson should be learned by the Americans that Iran is prepared. Iran doesn't want a regional war. No one wants a regional war. The only entity that wants a regional war is the Israeli regime. And they don't want to fight the war themselves. They want the Americans and the Europeans to fight the war for them, just like in the Red Sea. So the American people have to recognize that the Israelis are willing to sacrifice them, but they should also recognize that the Iranians.
Sa maikling salita ba, itong mga Israeli regime parang mandamay lang ba? Mandamay ng kaguluhan, mga Suki, no? O ginandamay yung ibang bansa. Si Macron nga ayaw na ayaw po, mga Suki. Kung gusto niya ang pagbenta ng mga armas ay ibaban po para sa Israel, no? Okay, hindi siya makonvince po sa mga Israeli government, no? Kasi mahilig mandamay. Okay, mandamay ng problema po nila. Okay, sa buong daigdig, mga Suki, no? Itong estilo ba? Ang strategy po ng Israel, no? Mandamay ng problema ng ibang tao. Okay. Ganun po ang ugali nila. Okay, mandamay. Okay. Kasi control nila po ang daigdig, mga kababayan, no? Sa kanilang expansion ng ideology po ng Zionism, mga kababayan, no? Okay, kahit saan po ang Zionism, okay, Zionist movement, kahit saan sa daigdig meron, mga kababayan, no? And then ang hawak po ay puro kayamanan ng daigdig, mga kababayan, no? Ganun po kautak po ng mga tao ito. Kaya sinasabi ng mga Western civilization, sila na po ang number 1 po tao sa daigdig, no? Okay. Sa kakuan nila, sa ka-advance ng thinking nila, itong mga Israel, mga kababayan, na mga Israeli kasi sila. Ayan, number 1 po okay, ang turing nila sa tao sa daigdig, itong mga tao ito, no? Ayan, sige.
The superpower in West Asia, and the Iranians have been preparing to defend themselves against a potential American attack for 2 decades now, ever since the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. The United States, we should all which is declining economically, which is dividing internally, which is losing the war in Ukraine, and which is losing the economic war with China, is only going to make things much worse for itself by increasing tensions with Iran. Let alone engaging in some war.
Thank you. Well, we're talking, Mohammed, the Iranian foreign minister, as I understand it, is visiting his counterpart in Saudi Arabia. Now, given the fact that the Saudis have been a reliable ally / proxy...
Okay, continue lang natin. Magandang discussion ba?
...in the Middle East for a long time. I can remember...
Para ma-educate kayo?
Iran had its People's Revolution in 1979. Ronald Reagan, about a year and a half later...
Para ma-educate kayo sa kasaysayan ng daigdig?
Saudi Arabia have a revolution, as if it was up to him. Anyway, there was a long-standing, close relationship between the U.S. and Saudis, and still is, and a long-standing confrontation between the new Iranian government and the Saudi government. And yet, here we are on the eve of what you said.
Okay, gusto namin mag-educate para hindi kayo madaya ba? Okay, kasi kawawa kayo kung madaya, tayo na lagi nalang madaya. Okay, kaya i-educate natin po ang gusto maging matuto mga kababayan, no? Yun naman ang purpose natin sa communication. Okay, mag-educate ng taong bayan po mga kababayan, no? Okay, masukin lang. Kasi kung okay, naka-stagnan lang tayo ay mangmang, wala na. Mangmang na lang mga suki, no? Hindi natin naintindihan po ang kapaligiran natin. Pero pag well-informed ka, well-educated ka sa mga ganito, so hindi ka madadaya. Hindi ka madadaya, sigurado po mga kababayan, no? Alam mo kung meron ng mga dumating mga ganon, alam mo, ganito. Okay, ganito pala ito. At least yung knowledge mo, okay, alam mo po mga kababayan. Yung libro po ni Topel, yung magaling na sumulat ng third wave, yung mga lumalabas ngayon, ng matagal na sinulat niyang libro niya, ang nangyayari ngayon sa daigdig, yon po ang basehan po ng libro na yon mga kababayan, no? Yung third wave, sinulat po ni Topel. Ayan po mga suki, no? Yung mga lumalabas na ngayon na mga kaganapan ngayon, nabasa na natin in advance po sa libro ni si Topel, no? Okay, third wave. Kaya hindi na tayo nagtataka. Bakit ganito ang daigdig ngayon? Kasi nabasa na natin in advance libro yon mga suki, no? Okay, malaki kasi ang libro na yun, no? Okay, pag binasa ko yon, ang libro na yon, minsan nakatulog na lang ako, hindi ko namalayan nakatulog na pala ako, no? And then pag nakagising naman, binasa naman uli mga suki, no? Ang kanyang libro. Itong mga happening nangyari ngayon, okay, sinabi na yun ni Topel mga kababayan, no? Okay, ng author na yon, itong third wave. Meron yung series ng libro niya ba? Okay? Ang gandang libro po yon na Topel, no? Pero wala na anay po ang libro na yon po doon sa kabilang bahay mga suki, no? Inanay. Wala na, nawala ang reference na libro ko na yan. Ni libro ni Topel, no? Ayan. Itong mga nangyari ngayon, mga kaguluhan ngayon, okay, nalagay niya doon sa libro niya, no? Kaya ako hindi na ako magtataka. Ayan po mga suki, no? Hindi na ako magtataka. Sige po. Pakinggan natin si Muhammad Marandi, no?
It's a possible Israeli-inspired, Israeli-induced regional war against Iran. Iran's foreign minister is being welcomed in Saudi Arabia. Let's talk about what that means from your point of view.
Usa.
It's the best method to attract money. Don't skip this video. God wants to speak to you. He has chosen you. If you are watching this video, it means you have been chosen to receive unexpected money. A large amount, so large that you can share it with everyone you love. The only thing you need to do for this to become reality is to listen to the miraculous 60-second audio. And then, money will start coming into your life from all possible places. If today you need to pay a bill...
No, I will not receive.
Or if you simply would like more money in your life...
Okay, I will not receive.
The 60-second audio will help you. This audio is so powerful and strong that you should listen to it only once a day. Otherwise, you might end up attracting too much money. Just so you understand the power of this audio, it has been hidden from you for years. Because this is the secret...
Do not convince me about that. Okay. Ayan. Sige.
It is another failure of the United States. Their whole motto for the region has been to rule and to keep the region divided. And as the United States grows weaker, and it is growing weaker very rapidly, much more rapidly than we anticipated, largely because of economic policies, but also the endless wars, and now the war in Ukraine is really draining the resources and the capabilities of Europe and the United States. Europe in particular is falling very fast. So the United States, its ability to manipulate as in the past is much more difficult, whereas its need for manipulation is much greater today because the United States is weaker than before. Now, the United States, as we discussed earlier, tried to keep Iran and Saudi Arabia divided by murdering General Soleimani. But then we saw how the Iranians and the Saudis were able to put aside many of their differences. The Chinese also played a part in reestablishing ties between the two. So this is just another symbol of American decline and how the Americans are failing to build a united front against Iran as they did in the past. And we have to remember that the ongoing genocide in Gaza, this is being watched across the world and across the region every day. So while
Okay, kaya sinabi ko kung ano libro na basa nila Barack Obama, nila Joe Biden, at saka mga ibang mga leader, ibig sabihin tayo rin magbasa po ng kanilang mga libro, no? Okay. Wala yung pagkaibahan. Kung ano ang laman ng utak nila, ibig sabihin, laman din ng utak natin. Kaya hindi tayo magkaiba sa kanila. Yung utak nila Barack Obama, o kaya nila Kamala Harris, o kaya nila Joe Biden, o kaya mga ibang leader, kasi magbasa rin tayo ng libro po mga kababayan, no? So walang kaiba. Ang kaibahan lang, sila mayaman masyado, tayo ay miskin lang, pobre lang mga, yun ang pagkaibahan. Pero yung laman ng mga nabasa nila, nabasa rin natin po karamihan mga suki, mga piling libro. Okay, yun ang kaibahan natin, sila ay influenza, okay, mayaman, maraming kwarta, tayo po kasi hindi natin ang hilig yun ng magparaming pera mga kababayan, no? Pero tungkol sa mga binabasa natin, okay, nabasa rin natin ng mga binabasa nila, no? So hindi na tayo magtataka. Ayan.
The legacy media supports this genocide and what many call a Holocaust. Because the numbers that are really dead are far greater than the official numbers. There are tens of thousands of people under the rubble, tens of thousands of people who died of disease and cancer and all sorts of other complications as a result of what the Israelis did to Gaza. And now the genocidal strikes in Lebanon. These are things that people across the region and across the world are seeing, across the global south in particular. And it resonates among people across the global south. I mean, when they watch these scenes, they see their own history. They see the history of colonialism. They see the history of empire. They see the scenes in front of them as a repetition of what they read in their history books, whether in different parts of Africa or Latin America or Asia. And that intensifies the anger and the outrage and the disgust that's directed towards the West. And the West has demolished its soft power capabilities as a result. Its image has been completely destroyed along alongside that of Israel, because the West is genocidal. The West, they can, CNN and MSNBC can justify these horrific acts all they want, or try to twist the narrative, or try to distort the reality all they want. Like, people are seeing these, and even in the West, people, the mood has shifted, and people are viewing the Israeli regime.
Okay, ayan.
Ang programang All Special Opinion Balita at iba pa ay tumatalakay sa mga isu pang kasalukuyan at napapanahon. Mapapolitika, mapaopinyon, mapakomentaryo at balita, ang programa ito ay patas sa lahat. Walang kinikilingan, walang kinakampihan, at walang pinapanigan ang programa ito. Ang programa ito ay public service sa kahanginan at trabaho lamang.
Okay, palagay ko gusto man natin magpatuloy, no? Gusto man natin magpatuloy ng balita pero wala tayong oras, no? So, ang gagawin ko na lang natin sa termination po ng programa natin sa umagang ito na lang, no? Palakpakan natin. Okay, yung si Professor Muhammad Marandi at saka itong katungkali niya, mga kababayan, no? Okay. Ayan. Okay, nakakonsume ako 1 oras at saka 28 minutos, no? Ang programa ko ngayon. Tama na? Okay, kung tapausin ko, mga 2 oras yun. Ayan. So, at least makakuha tayo ng mga additional knowledge natin. Okay, sa kasaysayan po ng Middle East, mga kabayan, saka West. Ayan, no? Pamagitan po ni Professor Muhammad Marandi, no? Ayan. Galing, no? Okay. Galing. Okay, hanapin ko ng sound and then i-terminate na natin ang programa ito. Babalik tayo mamayang hapon sa primetime news. Okay? Kung para magkaroon tayo additional knowledge. Okay? Sa problema po ng mundo. Problema kasi ng mundo, pag problema po ang mundo, damay tayo, mga kababayan, no? Okay, damay tayo. So, yeah. May number 1, mga suki, no? Kung hindi natin pag-aralan paano tayo makasurvive, okay, dito sa very complex world, wala. Talo tayo, no? Ayan. Kaya ang iba, maghakot na lang ng pera, no? Maghakot ng 1 billion pesos, dalahin po sa Manila. Ilang halimbawa, ilang 1 billion sa isang taon? 12 billion. Naku, daming kwarta, no? Okay, sa paliwanag po ni Bapa Abdurrao makakuha, no, sa kanyang interview. Okay, ni Benito, mga kababayan, no? Dami kasing dami bang tawag pumapasok, hindi ko nintindi. Okay, mga mixed tawag, may mga panakot, diba? Hindi ko nanintindi mga kababayan, no? Actually, ay pinaghandaan ko. Lalo na po, wala po sa phone book ko, hindi ako magsagot mga suki, no? Para maiwasan ko na, okay, yung mga panakot ba? Hindi ko nanintindi. Immune ako sa mga, okay, sa mga harassment, pamanakot, immune na ako, sanay na. Kaya nga bahala na, tatak bahala. Kung talagang hanggang doon ka, wala kang magawa, no? Hanggang doon ka lang. Kung ang buhay mo hanggang doon ka lang, wala na, hindi na ma-extend yun. Kaya ako pinabayaan na lang. Okay, sige po mga kababayan, pag mag-touch mga issue na medyo delikado, no? Okay, yung 1 billion na sinasabi po ni Bapa Abdurrahman makakuha, no? Okay. Galing sa MPWS BARM. Okay. Kaya pala hindi natapos ang mga project ng MPWS BARM. Okay, dahil po sa 1 billion na yan mga sukin, no? Okay. Kadali magkuha ng pera, no? Ay, naku. Kadali magkuha ng pera ng pamahalaan, no? 1 billion kung ibigay yan sa mga bangsamoro. Okay, o kaya hatian ako mga ganun, no? Hatian ako sa 1 billion na yon. Kahit na mga 100,000 lang. Lagay ko yumaman na ako mga kababayan, no? Sa 1 billion na yan. Grabe. Sige po, bahala na sila. Ayan po. Bahala na sila. Okay, basta magsabi lang tayo ng totoo mga kababayan. No? Ayan. Can you imagine, para sa project ng MPWS BARM, okay, natingga dahil po sa 1 billion na yan. Kung totoo yan, no? Ayan. Kaya sabi ko, after election, midterm election, talagang dapat halukayin yan ng mga kababayan. No, sana may mga makapasok, okay, mga matatapang na MP, okay, mga Congress, okay, sa House of Representatives, no? Grabe. Ayan. Sige po. Okay, magpaalam ako muna. Okay, dito po sa termination ng programa natin na Consolidated News, and then tinipon mga balita po rito pinagsama-sama natin. Okay, kung saan-saan po manggaling-galing sa mga independent news. Okay, mga mainstream media, social media, SOCMED, at saka itong mga ugnayan sa mamamayan, no? Yung mga feedback, okay, pinaparating sa atin. Yung mga maraming tumawag, maraming mensahe, okay, mga suki, no? Kaya nakukuha po natin ng itong mga problema natin sa kapaligiran, no? Ayan. So, ang isyong 1 billion, napakalaking pera mga suki, no? Ayan. Okay. Natingga ang mga project para sa bangsamoro, sa mga minority. Okay, kaya palagat tama rin ang holo-sulo, no? Parang tama rin sila. Okay, kumalas muna pansamantala, no? Kumalas muna ang holo-sulo. Tama din nata yun. Tama, no? Okay, tama. Kaya ngayon basta muna tayo. Basilan tawi-tawi. Wala nang basulta. Basta. Ayan. Grabe. Sige po, magpaalam tayo. Dito po sa programa, sa platform po ng ADLSN TV News Online. And then, sa programa po rin ng Halo-Halo Special Opinion Balita at iba pa. Kasama po sa Bisyo Publiko Tinig ng Mamamayan. At saka sa ugnayan sa mamamayan, tulong nyo, salamat. Okay, okay, salamat. Kung hindi mga galing sa mga info, anong kinalaman natin po mga kababayan, no? Kaya galing sa mga info, and then biniverify natin. Okay? Kung ano na po mga kababayan, no? Okay, kung balido ba o hindi. Okay. Ganun po. Ang katulad ng iso ngayon ng ano no, ng Zamboanga del Sur, itong mga dating gobernador magmayor na sa Pagadian, itong si Governor Victorio. O kung hindi galing sa bayan nyo, yung babag sa Kalambuan, yung hadlang ba sa progreso, itong si Governor nyo, hindi natin alam yon. Pero dahil galing po sa ugnayan, sa mamamayan, na nakuha natin mga plano ba? Itong mga nanungkulan po sa Zamboanga del Sur, no? Ang sabi po ng mga netizen, babag sa Kalambuan. Hadlang ba sa progreso? Eh, alam natin. Okay, alam natin ganun po ang yun po ang binanat po ng Samico. Samico po ng Pagadian City, no? So maglaban nata si Victorio at saka itong si Samico sa siyudad ng Pagadian. Sino kaya manalo rito mga kababayan, na? Ang issue po ni pinukul po ni Samico, Mayor Samico incumbent ngayon, babag sa Kalambuan, no? Babag. Mabigat 'yon. Ayan. Sige po. Okay, so there you are. Wala tayong masamang tinapay po mga kababayan dito sa Zamboanga. Antay tayo sa mga debate nila, no? Okay, issue for issue. Okay, galing po sa Team Dalipe, Manix Dalipe, and then team naman ng District 1 Representative, Kimer Adanolason, no? Mabigat din ang election dito sa Zamboanga, tingnan natin. Ay, okay. Subaybayan din natin. Base tayo sa kanilang mga plataforma de gobyerno at saka mga issue po pinupukol din nila dito sa Zamboanga, no? Okay, makuha nito. Thrilling ito mga kababayan, no? Parehas may mga pera. Okay, Dalipe, alam mo naman galing sa House of Representatives, may pera yan. Okay, si Kimer Adanolaso, may pera din yan. Contractor yan. Ayan. So, maganda po ang labanan po rito sa Zamboanga, no? Okay. Sige po. Ayan. Okay, so magpaalam na ko. Wala tayong masamang tinapay. So, there you are. Wala tayong masamang tinapay. Sa totoo lang, no? 100%. Okay, wala tayong masamang tinapay, no? So, negosyo natin, meron na tayong mga resibo ito, no? O, may mga resibo na tayo, no? Ayan. Okay. Wala na po masabi ang government. Okay, tayo ay mag-comply po ng mga resibo. Okay, para makaisutan ng resibo kung may mga income po. Kahit peseta-peseta, mag-resibo tayo pag peseta-peseta. Kasi sa patakaran, pag umabot na mga 25 pesos to 50 pesos sa income, ay kailangan mag-iso ng resibo, no? So, sundin natin. Ayan. So, mag-comply tayo ng legal. Okay, utos ng BIR. Kuhan tayo ng resibo, no? Okay. Kaya sabi ko, negosyo ito legal, legit. Ayan po, no? Okay, hanggang dito muna. This has been Abs. Damahan lamang po, no? Okay, araw ng Biyernes, happy weekend. Okay, mamayang hapon pero magbalita pa ako. And then bukas, linggo ay pahinga tayo. Ayan.